Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Monday evening couch conversations with the doctors. I'm Dr. Maya Green, excited to be here, and I'll just kick us off. Welcome to our community. Chime in with your questions, comments at any point in time, and I'll just kick us off starting with Dr. Miller. Nikki usually says she threatens you to be here every Monday, but yet you show up. Thankful for we're thankful for everything you offer community. Dr. Miller, please go ahead and introduce
Yeah,
yourself.
good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. James Miller. I'm a retired internist, practiced around 40 years in Chicago and in the western suburbs. Retired from clinical medicine in 2019. Um, I learned a lot over my years of practice, and one of the things I also learned is that our community is in great need of healing. And so,
Mhm.
even though I don't do clinical medicine, I'm still trying to do what I can to heal the community. And when we talk about healing, we have to look at this in a holistic manner. It's not just one thing. It's not just all talking about physical failure. There's mental failure. There's social failure. There's political failure. There's financial failure, and all these things can have adverse effect on people's health. And so, we're trying to do what we can to try to bring this to some kind of understanding and try to help the community and empower the community to be able to deal with it in best as we can.
Absolutely. Holistic mind, body, soul. I love it. Dr. Graham, who was in Florida, is in Chicago. Where are we, Dr. Graham? Good
We're,
evening. Please introduce yourself. Let us know where the party is.
okay, well, listen, I'm back in Chicago. I
Okay.
was in Indianapolis seeing my oldest daughter married this weekend. It
Mm-hmm.
was a
Nice.
wonderful ceremony, a wonderful event. Everything went very, very well. I'm like Dr. Miller, I was also a retired physician. I spent 30 years as a rheumatologist working in the western suburbs, and I spent 2 years working with a congressman in Washington, D.C. It was an extraordinary experience, real eye opener, and it's an honor to be here with my colleagues. And I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. Next, we have Dr. Tony Hampton, a family medicine doctor, obesity, helping our community that are living with obesity. Low carb nutrition is what it says. Tell us more about that. Welcome, Dr. Tony Hampton.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Maya. For me, it's about uh, trying to connect with the community in a way that speaks to where they are. And most of the times where they are is that they're trying to heal and they're just looking for somebody to guide and hold their hand. I've been fortunate to get some additional training in those areas you've mentioned, and those areas have given me a foundation that allows me to always try to understand why people are sick. Just today, I had a patient who was ill, and I said, "Well, why are you ill?" And we spent a lot of time just trying to, peel that onion. So for me, taking time to speak to the community is something I think we all should do. While protecting ourselves, making sure we don't overdo it, which is why periodically I won't show up because I'm busy trying to be a husband, trying to be a father, trying to recover from busy work. So we are happy to be here. We thank the congressman for the opportunity to go directly to the community, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hampton. And as Nikki always says, the vanguard on healthcare. I can't do a good Nikki, but we are welcoming Congressman Danny K. Davis. Thank you for having this. Please take time and welcome everybody and tell us about what's special about today.
Well, let me just thank again all of you for taking time from your busy schedules to be engaged and be involved and help us look comprehensively or as comprehensively as we can. I try and learn something every day. I think that living is a lifelong learning process.
Hmm.
And if you could pick up something every day, if you can find something to be excited about, if you can find something to believe more profusely in, I've been inspired today because it was the inauguration of a new mayor for the city of Chicago. And he closed his comments about saying things that he would hope to do and things he would be doing. One of the things he ended with was that he was going to work to reopen the mental health centers that had been closed a number of years ago. I remember when they were closed. I remember fighting against them being closed. I remember marching with people and going to demonstrations and doing all the things that you do in terms of advocacy. He also talked about education a great deal. And I remember, of course, when many of our public schools, 49, 50 of them, were closed and shuttered. And I remember riding on the bus with the Chicago Teachers Union, going around the city looking at those schools and envisioning what could ultimately be done with them once the resources and all were put together. I was at the repurposing of one of those last week, and there are others that are scheduled to be repurposed. I'm going to wish for the mayor the ability to find the resources. You know, the ideas are generally there, but figuring out how to fund things. Right now, we have a debt ceiling fight going on that will affect the economy of our country in a big way, big way. So I'm hoping that's going to get resolved at the national level so that local governments like we have in Chicago can be able to generate the money. There's a big crisis relative to the number of immigrants who are coming to our city. And our city has kind of run out of money to deal with the immigration or the immigrant issue of people coming. And I heard the mayor say that the city of Chicago would not turn its back on people in need of help. So all of these things are really on the table. And of course, health looms at the top of that, because even with our immigrant population that has come to town, is coming, they need health care. I don't care where they come from. They need health care. And the mayor said, we're not going to be turning our backs on them. They can't go back to Guatemala and get health care if that's where they came from. They can't get health care in the United States, in Mexico, if that's where they come from. So the humanitarian spirit of the message kind of excites me, and I'm ready to dig in and help in any way that we can. And thank all of you for the giving of yourselves that you do each and every Monday night. So let's get it on. I forget who said it, but one of those blues.
Marvin Gaye.
That would be Marvin Gaye, who talked about another type of healing, but we're not going to.
We'll interpret it
yes.
our way.
Yes.
All
So
right.
Congressman Davis, thank you so much for that. I know you talked a lot about hope. There are several studies, one that was published in Global Epidemiology that looked at how hope and faith has a huge impact on healing, whether it's community healing, individual healing, psychological healing. First, good evening. Linda Johnson says, good evening. See, that's why we need Nikki. Linda Johnson says, good evening to Linda Johnson. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Dr. Miller, a lot of what you talk about centers on hope, faith, and wellness. In your years of experience, can you talk a little bit about how faith and hope kind of plays a factor in healing for individuals as well as community?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is that when we really look at a person who doesn't have hope, their ability to even seek what they need, or even sometimes to recognize it, because they feel so far under that when you lose hope, you just don't, you lose, become depressed, you become all those things that doesn't allow you to really look out and to see the possibilities of overcoming. So it is important that people can see that. We all, in our lives have times and situations where, things just don't seem to go, that they're going to work for us. That, we keep running into various, blockades in our travel and what in our lives. But, we still need a victory now and then. Otherwise, we sort of, if we don't get that victory, we don't get that success, then we will struggle with that. And then beyond that, I mean, I think that it's also important for, even if you don't have a victory, for you to know that a victory is possible. That in some way, in the faith community, they always say that, God will make a way. And I know that God will make a way somehow. So you have to have something that you can trust in, something that you can believe in, that will lift you up out of the trenches that you are in, that seem to be holding you back, seem to be blocking you from whatever it is. And we know that when people, I going to give you a little experience this evening. I went today. I took some mothers to one of the nursing homes to visit one of the mothers who had gotten sick and is now in the nursing home, and they hadn't seen her in about 3 or 4 months. So we went there to visit her, and she's blind, and she's has some dementia, and so she obviously were not in her usual way of communicating. And so as we tried to talk with her and just try to give her some comfort and by our presence and some and also to bring her some hope and cheer. It seemed like nothing was going to really change her. And, during that time that she would, she had these various times she would come on and say, things, either verses from the Bible or, her belief in God. She would just make these kinds of a statement. But as we sort of, getting close to the end of our visit, and we decided that we were going to pray with her. And we told her that we wanted to pray with her, and she that sort of perked her up. And even the prayer, the expression and the asking for help and healing for her, we saw in her a change in her demeanor, a change in her so she went from sort of being docile and kind of withdrawn to feeling that, wow, I feel better. She want to set up then after these kinds. So what I'm saying is that we all need something that we can believe in, that's going to get us up above and beyond what it is that's keeping us from being able to enjoy our lives. And when people get that, they heal better, they heal faster. They're more, their bodies get more responsive. And I'm sure that there are some chemical changes that take place that's related to depression and all these other things that goes on in our mind that has a negative kind of effect on how we respond to even treatments or to all the things that we're trying to overcome and where we're trying to get. So I've seen this over the years in my practice, that when people feel better, they respond better. And when they respond better, they become more receptive to seeking care, to seeking to improve. And so this is such an important thing. You know, when we're in a situation sometimes in certain community where there just seems like a depression on all the things, there's a lack of resources, a lack of opportunities. These are things that kind of become that knocked out for a lot of people, and prevent them from being able to, you know, have that necessary zeal to and desire to succeed.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Graham, rheumatology, not allergy and immunology, correct? Okay. Well, I'll just say that there was actually an article published in Immunology and Allergy Clinical Journal in North America that kind of spoke to exactly what you were saying, Dr. Miller. People heal better when they have a faith or an anchor, whatever it is, to hold on to and grow in. This article actually talked about the opposite of that. When people are under psychological stress, like you said, Dr. Miller, there are chemicals that contribute to healing. When people are under stress, there's chemicals that actually will contribute to a process where a person doesn't physically heal as fast. I'm talking about the wounds don't heal. Like physical wounds don't heal, not only the spiritual and the mental wounds, but the physical wounds don't heal as fast when people are experiencing psychological stress. So, you know, I think that's very, you know, notable. Not only that to the individual, but also I think before we were on, Congressman Davis spoke a little bit about kind of the energy that was in the room during the inauguration, but that is equivalent to the energy that can be in our communities. And that's where you get our healing programs that heal communities, our ideas, because you know me, I keep it 100. Solutions that heal communities don't come from outside the communities, they come from within the communities. So that's why a lot of our gatherings and our community programs and things like that are so very important. I can talk all day about social determinants of health and how a person's quality of life plays into that. I don't know, Dr. Hampton, Dr. Graham, if you have any input on that.
You know, absolutely. And I can say that I learned about social determinants of health after I left practice. I learned that in Washington, D.C., working with the congressman. And I can tell you, I can reflect back in my career and I can identify those sets of circumstances where, as a physician, you might have the right diagnosis, you might have good treatment, but if the patient doesn't have access to your office, if they don't have access to the pharmacy, if they don't have transportation, if they're in a social set of circumstances that are unstable or dangerous, if they're in a community where the air is bad or the water is bad, no matter what I might do on my part, none of it will be effective and help that patient because these other things are at play that will interfere from achieving the desired outcome. And so I'm really a big believer. I know this to be true, that 80% of the outcomes that occur in healthcare are affected by the social determinants of health. And I think this is the problem we have in our society. This is where we have some of the most profound health inequities. I think this is where we need to really focus our attention. If we're going to have a healthy and vibrant country, we need healthy communities.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I totally agree. And I think that everything in life is based on having basic knowledge about why people struggle. So I spend a lot of time in my clinic thinking of when people struggle, it's typically not because they want to struggle. The struggle is there because there is some barrier to them being their best or being in a position to be their best. So in many communities, rather you're in an urban environment like Chicago, where most of us work and practice, or in the rural parts of the state, you're going to have issues around economics that are going to be barriers. Rather, it's I'm not making enough money to pay my bills and or enough money to pay for the copay, because so now I'm going to have issues with medicine adherence because I can't pay my bills, right? And so it's not that I don't want to take my blood pressure or diabetes pill, but I just can't afford to. And then you think about the neighborhoods that so many people live in, which, I kind of have the luxury of living in an environment where I don't hear gunshots at night. I live in an environment that if I decided to go take a jog, it would be fairly safe for me to do that. I live in an environment where if my kids wanted to go play outside, I could do it without thinking about it, without having to literally stand there, prepared to protect them, because it's a pretty safe environment. There are many people who don't have that. And when you're in an environment like that, not only is it going to, negatively impact you, but it's going to really impact your health, because it's stressful to be in an environment where you hear the ambulance or the gunshots every night. And not to mention, as I talk to my patients about how to maybe adopt a lifestyle that I want them to, I have to be careful about the language I use, because sometimes something as simple as a carb, they may not even know what a carb is. And because they don't know, if I don't explain that to them, they may struggle to achieve their health related goals. So you got, economic issues, you have issues around the environment, the education, and the food insecurity, the food deserts that exist. And I can say to them, I need you to eat a certain way. But if they go into their grocery store and there's no fresh vegetables, or the meat looks like it's already old before they purchase it, they're not likely to buy those things. They're more likely to buy foods that are processed, because they don't have access to good foods. And of course, a lot of what we talked about in the past is how important it is to have a sense of community. We have a community here. I have a low carb community that I hook up with. I'll be going to San Diego in August to speak and to be around that community. And if you don't have a sense of community and people to support you, whether it's at home, at work, at church, or in the community at large, you're going to struggle. So I just think that as a person who cares about the world I live in, I have to be thoughtful about these things, so that when people are in front of me and they're struggling, I'm not pointing my finger saying, you just don't care enough, or you're not working hard enough. I have to have the ability to look at them and say, man, I see you're struggling. Let me do my best to come up with a way to help you through your struggle. And I think if we have that kind of perspective, we will stop blaming people when they struggle. And then more importantly, we will have ways to assist them through their struggle. And that's kind of how I think we have to think about this, so that we will meet people where they are and support them in the way that needs to be supported.
Before I get into, now we get into social determinants of health. And that's my, a passion of mine. But before we get into that, hello, Lance Parrott. Thank you for joining us. Also, I want to thank Crystal Turner, founder of Mentally Magnificent. I took a note from Nikki's page, and when we get on a topic, I like to call some of the people in the community that are doing this work. So thank you, Crystal, for joining us. And we just had a couple of questions. I know you have to get back to it, but I don't know if you want to take a second, introduce yourself, and then I'll ask a couple of questions.
Thank you for asking me to come on. Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Turner. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I'm the founder of Mentally Magnificent, which is a holistic mental health company where I support African American people who have endured childhood trauma to rise out of that, and heal from that, utilizing African principles and other natural remedies to help with that process. I do work in community health as well, and I do use traditional approaches as well for people who that is the avenue that they choose to go through. But that's who I am. I've been practicing for 5 years now.
Okay. Thanks, Crystal. You know what? The reason you popped in my head is we had Dr. Miller here talking about what I call biopsychosocial, or mind, body, spirit healing, and talking about how our community just doesn't heal with a pill from an allopathic doctor in an exam room, but there's various ways our community accesses healing, and various ways our community receives healing and goes about that. What is the importance of kind of being in the community, knowing those nuances? So in times like post-COVID, things like that, where our community has a very acute need to heal, or what is the importance of already being there and making all types of healing accessible?
I think it is paramount because, first of all, when we have things that happen like COVID, we have this extended amount of time where we become in this pattern of being sort of isolated, even when things were opening back up, right? I noticed that even for myself and for other people, just navigating back into socialization seemed stagnant. But what we do know is history shows us and research shows us that cultures where there's community, they tend to have less suicide rates. When we are coming from a space of being more individualistic and being by ourselves and thinking that means that we think we can talk to help support, that much more pressure. But when we are in is at the forefront, because that shows that support, that's leaning to talk to help to supply. So community is a huge thing that doesn't necessarily.
Is Crystal going in and out for others?
Am I still going in and
out? Say it one more time.
Am I still going in and out?
Nope. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I just say that community is that thing that helps us have more support. It shows us through research that, through evidence that suicide rates have more support in the community. And that's just one portion of our community, us being connected with our body, regardless of what that is. Are we good?
Yeah. When you hold your head down, we can hear. When you bring it up and the inflection, it goes away.
Okay. So no, just community is important. Understanding our body's work, what stimulates our body, our gut health, and that brain health, that portion of spirit, not spirit connection, then dealing with the mind. A lot of principles that we learn about in our current society, where we learn to utilize our mind to come together and work. But one, it equals support. It equals being able to lean on someone. It equals just being able to have access to someone who's willing to listen. And when we see that people don't have that, and you're by yourself more, the rates of suicide are higher.
All right. So I'll just recap a couple of things. One of them I know, Dr. Hampton, you're going to lean forward on. Crystal talks a lot about gut health and that how that offers healing overall. But it sounded like you spoke about the importance of having someone to listen to what's going on, and when you don't have that, that increases feelings of isolation and suicide, which kind of goes directly into the first global epidemiology study that I was talking about, which is when you don't have hope, when you start to lose hope, you do see increased risk of suicide and things like that associated with isolation. That also, I know I always talk about this book, Plagues from from Athens to AIDS. I know I always talk about it, but it also talks about the overall communal aspects of periods of isolation. Last week we talked about Red Summer, which came directly after the 1918 flu, where there was a period of isolation, and then the summer after that in Chicago, there was an increased spike of violence, things like that. That's why I'm glad the congressman was mentioning today at the inauguration of our new mayor, there was a sense of hope in the room, and then which led us to how hope contributes to healing. And so we were talking a lot about that. Dr. Hampton, gut health. Dr. Hampton, I know you and Crystal can, feed this all day, but I do find that gut health also does contribute to whether the mood is down, or it can increase elevated moods and things like that. I don't know if either of you want to touch on that, and then I want to touch on social determinants of health.
Yeah, I think who knew how important our gut health was for our mood our behavior. All you got to do is be a parent. And when I raised my two beautiful sons who are now in their 20s, I noticed that if I gave them food that would be, let's just say a cupcake, for example, I wouldn't be surprised if their behavior changed shortly after that, a little more erratic, out of control, hyper. So part of it is knowing that what you put in your body, if you want to be on a roller coaster, have a cupcake every morning. Add a little coffee to it every morning and see what happens, and you may feel pretty good when it's going down. I guarantee you that's gonna feel good, but then you're gonna be on a roller coaster as your sugar spikes, and then your insulin's gonna make it go down. And then when it goes down, you don't feel so good, and then your ability to focus, your cognitive function just declines. So part of it is making sure what you put in your body is not gonna lead to that unstable blood sugar. But the other piece is just the knowledge of knowing that there is a gut-brain axis. There's a connection between your central nervous system that deals with your brain and your gut. We call it the enteric nervous system, and they're linked in such a way that, believe it or not, 70% of your mood hormone, which we think of as serotonin, is made in your gut. And that's a remarkable reality, because if it's made in my gut, that means that if I have a gut that's not healthy, then I may have a mood that's not healthy. So it's very important that we know that connection and we feed our body things that protects our gut instead of makes it, unhealthy. And that speaks of things like your microbiome, that healthy bacteria that uh, is really important, because the gut bacteria, um, you know, if functioning properly, will make these short chain fatty acids, whose then job is to protect the lining of your gut. So if you eat foods that disrupts your microbiome, then you're going to have a leaky gut, or a gut that's not healthy. And the gut's ability to make serotonin and those other hormones is going to be limited. So I think it's really important that people understand being healthy is so much more than just, making sure that you think a certain way. Is more than just how you eat. It's more than just your sleep. It's more than just your stress. It's more than just your relationships. It's all of these things
Mm-hmm.
together, all of which will negatively impact you. So our goal is to find out where we have gaps. And if you have a gap somewhere in one of these areas, let's get to working on those gaps so that we can then be optimal, so we can be present for our families, and certainly we want to feel good too. So I do appreciate Crystal bringing that up, because it's so important for us to be healthy.
I'm just echoing everything you said, and just making that connection. Like, who knew that there was this direct connection to gut nervous system, right? We don't, we don't, that's not a connection we know automatically. And so it's just so intriguing that it is. And when you think about, like you mentioned, how when you have issues with your gut, how you notice issues with the mood, and then on the other end of that, when you are nervous, how you have a nervous stomach, right? It's like, if you see these connections happening, we can see that there is something going on there. But diet is just one of those things that, I'm not saying that people have to go vegan, but I remember when I did that, I didn't do it with anything in mind about my mental health. But I noticed that after I did that for an extended amount of time, my anxiety and my depression, all of that decreased. And it was just so, it was just one of those things like, wow, this is not anything I thought was.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more point. Like, I had been vegetarian, vegan. I'm now more low carb, but I want to really emphasize that when you make a change from processed food and sugars and highly refined grains, rather you're doing vegan, Mediterranean, DASH diet, low carb, keto, carnivore, whatever, you're going to be so much better off than you were before you made that change. And so really what's important, in fact, I'll be going to um, San Diego in August to speak to Symposium for Metabolic Health. And I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? And I want to thank Dr. Terry Mason, because I thought about him and I said, I'm going to say, my title is going to be something like, how vegans and carnivores can live in harmony. And so I'm going to speak to the importance of living in a world where we honor all dietary patterns. But the most important thing is that we're eating real food, getting away from the garbage. And then if I'm vegan, what do I need to supplement with to support that? If I'm carnivore, are there some electrolytes I need to think about? And I think that's the world we want to live in, because the truth be told, even when you go to those longest lived civilizations, some are plant-based, some are meat-based, but what they all have in common is what we're talking about today, which is they know how to support each other. They know how to get out in nature. They know how to take a break and make sure they're taking care of their whole body. They get into, saunas and they sweat out the toxins. They do all of these things that us in America could do a better job at. And if we do those things, we will find ourselves in a much better place. And guess what? It'll restore hope. And the hope is so important because it gives you the motivation to maybe do the things that the doctor asked you to do in the first place. But if you don't have hope, if you think you're going to spend the rest of your life on medication and not be healed from illness, then what's going to happen is you're going to lose your motivation because your hope is gone. So I love having hope. I'm glad that Dr. Maya started the conversation talking about hope. Hope has infused joy into my life. Hope has allowed my relationships to be healthier. Hope has made me smile more, crack a few extra jokes at work. When you have hope, it changes everything. So I just hope that people who are listening to this are open to the idea that your current state does not have to be your forever state, and that there is hope that you can heal. But starting with nutrition, starting with hope, all of those things will make it much better. So I really think that's the key. And I'm really grateful that that's going to be the way we're going to move forward with hope. So I know that Dr. Meyer kind of slipped away. Technology, right? And
Yeah, let me just throw something else in there with this, Tony. We're talking about uh, we're talking about the benefits of hope, and about the impact of not having hope. And when we, not just looking at our physical health, but when we look at some of the things that are going on and creating a lot of problems in our community, which is conflicts, violence, and it's I mean, if we just look just logical at ourselves, when we're not feeling good and something interfere or upset us, we're less likely to be in a way that we can we're less tolerant. And so when we deal with a bunch of people or create a situation where a lot of people are less tolerant, then you have a situation where there's going to be a lot of bad results of conflict. We all going to have different thoughts, different patterns of how we do things, and we can all really live together, but we can't if we're going to constantly be in conflict with one another. And so when we are happier, when we know that that there's hope, there's the opportunity to achieve what it is that each individual is trying to achieve, we tend to be more tolerant of other ideas, other people. And so and so when we're talking about all these things that are going on with our young people in terms of violence and those kinds of things, these problems also play a role in their reaction to one another, or to just anybody who happen to be in their environment at that point in time. When you don't feel good, you tend to growl. When you feel good, you tend to smile. The things that are, and so it's so important. And and when if you ever venture into a situation when you're feeling well, you got up, you had a good morning, and then even if you face a tough task, you handle it a lot better Then if you running, you got up late, you don't feel good, and you're in a rush. Now you're gonna have a problem day, because everything that doesn't go just right creates another problem. And now you have to try to fix all this stuff together, and after a while, it just get to the point that it's going to be overwhelming. And this is oftentimes, people get when you get overwhelmed, you tend to be less tolerant of somebody coming in and telling you how to fix it, because now you just don't want to hear it. And so all these things, I think, do play a role in our getting along, in our and dealing with each other, which is another important part of our health, our community, our communal with one another. That need to be healthy, our relationship. And when we have bad relationship with each other, that creates a bad situation in terms of us trying to live together.
Yeah, and Michael says, has anyone had any experience using celery juice as a healing modality for autoimmune uh, issues?
Boy, oh boy, I could speak to this one.
Hmm.
And the answer to the question is if you went to a medical library and you look for the articles for the last 20 years, you cannot find one article about this. What you can find.
Oh, did you turn your camera off?
About celery juice.
Did you turn your camera off?
But if you took a look at what the dietitians say about this, celery juice is not necessarily the best thing for everybody. For instance, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, there are certain starches in celery juice which will give you more cramps and more gas. The sad part about this is, if you're pregnant, celery juice may cause premature contractions, and you can lose your baby. The person who's promoting celery juice is not a physician. I really recommend that you go look on Wikipedia to learn about this individual and learn about their background before you try to improve your health through that particular.
All right.
Outstanding, Doug, and I thank you so very much. Just want to remind everybody that the Congressman has some great things coming up soon. I've been having some technical difficulties, and as you can see, the Congressman may be having a few, but he can definitely hear you. So he's a part of the conversation, and he's there to hear you. He's having some technical difficulties with his camera, but he can hear you. So whatever you got, whatever the conversation goes, he's there to make sure that he can answer questions and be a part just as well. I'm having so many tech difficulties, so I'm going to sign off. You guys are doing a great job. We've got a lot going on. The community was actually texting saying that they couldn't see and that you guys were having difficulties, and that's why I tried to sign in. But thank you guys so very much for being here. As always, Carrie Steele said that you guys did not say that she was here and listening, so wanted to make sure you knew that Carrie Steele is here. So is Sister Bonnie McCain. And thank you guys so much. I want to say hello to Linda, who's there just as well. Linda always wants the Congressman to know that she is a part of the show. Her and Karen Yarbrough, they always want the Congressman to know. So Maya, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Nikki, for setting us up, getting us together, and organizing. Robert Russell says, great insight and connection between our gut and brain. And Marvin Glenn says, thanks for the information. Trying very hard to eat healthy. Annie Mae 4610 says it's very difficult to get in a healthy place when there is no support system, which brings us to our social determinants of health, which are known as economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, community and social context, and the healthcare system. Now, those are what's listed on CDC. Kaiser actually added a separate column that focuses on food and nutrition. So that just underscores everything that the panel is saying here and everything Annie is saying. So thank you, Annie Mae, for that. I know we have about 2 minutes left. And Nikki usually does this part. See, we need Nikki when going and coming. This is a part where we just have our until next Mondays. So I'll go ahead and I'll start with you, Dr. Miller. What is your until next Monday? You're on mute.
Is that it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need to really get beyond just saying that, and to trust that, to trust that the various makeup, the various individuals, the various people that are part of your village, they have an important part to play in our happiness, our well-being, and having a safe and healthy community, safe and healthy individual. And so what I'm saying is, let us get serious about really about our village, bringing it together, allowing it to function as it need to function, so that we can be better. You just can't. In other words, I can't if my foot is in pain, the rest of me also going to feel the discomfort. And so we have to understand that. So when we all working together, helping to heal each other situation, it sets forth put us in a better situation to be able to solve the problem and to get along better and to do better. So let's take our village serious.
Thank you so much. Crystal, until next Monday.
Until next Monday, I would say just taking small steps in terms of your health, in terms of your nutritional health, your self-care. That's where I focus at. It's always an opportunity to do something a little bit better for me. So, I do have my moments that are not there. So just continuing to bring that forth and have awareness of what I do that can be better for me, particularly for our community.
Thank you so much. Dr. Graham, until next Monday.
So this week, I learned a new term. It's called food swamps as opposed to food deserts. And these are areas where you see nothing but fast food places for miles and miles and miles. And so I'm right with Dr. Hampton. Real food is healthy. If you eat better, you'll feel better. Try not to stop off in the swamp to get your meal.
And Lance Parrott says, great discussions from all on the panel. Thank you, Lance. Dr. Hampton, until next Monday.
I think I'll just add more thoughts to the question around celery juice. And I think going back to what Dr. Graham says, this is not magical thinking in terms of what you should and shouldn't eat, right? I would always start with real food, right? Now, I'm not suggesting celery juice is not real food, because it is, but just try to eat food when you start your journey in the form that it was created. And if you start there, you'll be in a better place. Now, we already know that other things like juicing is not a bad thing. It just depends on your body. So if I so many of my patients don't juice a lot, particularly fruit, because most of them have diabetes. So a lot of times it spikes their sugar. And don't listen to Dr. Hampton, listen to your meter. If you consume celery juice is pretty good. It's probably less than 10 carbs per cup. But I guess I would just start there. Eat real food. And then if you want to experiment with certain things, after doing your research, like Dr. Graham suggested, then you can do that, because some people are saying, well, celery juice is good for your blood pressure, et cetera. So I just think it's important that we think big picture. Let me eat. If I eat animals, unlike, Crystal, then make sure it's like as least processed as possible. And if I'm eating plants, make sure it's not the plant in the Beyond Impossible or it's okay to eat those periodically, but that's not health food. That's processed food. They sell it as health food. And I ate plenty of that stuff when I was a vegetarian, but things in boxes I would avoid. I would eat the stuff outside the grocery store. And if you eat that way, it's kind of hard to get that wrong. Most importantly, you listen to your body. And if I eat a Brussels sprout or even the celery juice, if my body says, nah, then I listen to my body. My body may not like that. And I just think that your body will give you as much information as those randomized controlled trials. So I just want everybody to be open to different approaches, but just be as holistic as possible about what you eat. And I think that'll bless you in ways that you can't imagine.
Thank you, Dr. Hampton. Mo in the City 03 says thank you. Annie Mae says thank you. Michael Kropinski says, does this always air on YouTube Live? I had a hard time finding it in the last weeks. Thank you for that. We'll look at it and get that to you. You can consistently find it on Facebook on Nikki Harvey's page. Now, we have Lance Parrott saying, gotta say, '06. I can't say the '06 or whatever. To both of my fraternity brothers, Congressman Davis and brother Dr. Hampton, who is also my Xavier. Okay, we're not going to start a HBCU war right now because we gotta go. Okay, Alabama A&M Bulldogs. But thank you all so much, and I will hand it over to our Congressman, Congressman Danny K. Davis. Thank you so much. Congressman Davis, can you take us out?
Well, thank you all so very much. As a matter of fact, yesterday was Mother's Day, and to all the mothers retroactively that we did not get an opportunity to wish you a happy day. But I can tell you that people were engaged. I must have attended at least 10 Mother's Day events over the last 3 or 4 days, and all of them were exemplary. They were all upbeat. But I read a story on the way here. I picked up a newspaper in the airport, and a fellow named Andrew Holmes. Many people who follow things in the metropolitan area of Chicago know who he is. He's always doing something relative to people experiencing difficulty. But he had a Mother's Day event for 6 women. All of them were over 100 years old. And so he had a little brunch for them, and they went downtown in limousines and all. And of course, one of the ladies I know, Mary Muse, woman who used to live in Chicago, she and her mother both moved out of Chicago, and they live out in the south suburbs. But she's 111. Her mother, Mitch, was 111. But the real deal for all of these people is that every one of them were seriously upbeat activists. If you read the story, you will read comments about what they were wearing and how attractive their garments were. And Mary and her mother wore the same kind of hat. And my point is that people who seem to be engaged oftentimes have a tendency to live longer. And we are experiencing longer lengths of life. And the other interesting thing, over the weekend and last week, I met with a young woman who is establishing an end of life business in terms of she's been doing this for a long time, and she's now establishing a not-for-profit to focus on just helping people to be able to better understand what goes on at that point when the time is coming. And so people are living longer. People are finding ways to keep enjoying life. If all of these people were more than 100 and they were focused on their garments and what they were going to be wearing and some classy stuff, well, that keeps them thinking upward rather than thinking downward. And the good book says that as a person thinketh, so he or she shall be. And it used to say as a man thinketh, but they've changed that. And it is as a person thinketh, so is he or she, or so is that person. So this focus on thinking your way out of being downtrodden out of being, unhappy and unhealthy. If you can think your way out of it. I was looking at my Bible I had behind my desk here. And of course, I turned it to the book of Job. And so Job had gone to the bottom and actually cursed the day that he was born and had it wiped off. Say, it's best that that day be erased, never to appear. But then he rose up and came out of that depression and did all right. So mine until next Monday is simply rise up. If you're down, figure a way to get up and you'll be all right. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the evening and a great until next Monday.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
Have a good evening, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.